Lucas Vance had everything a man could dream of: a tech empire valued at $3 billion a penthouse overlooking Central Park, and the kind of power that made senators tremble. But as he sat in the corner of the city's most exclusive restaurant, holding his 6-month-old son Lucas, felt like the poorest man on earth. His son Leo was fading away, refusing to eat, constantly crying and slowly starving despite the best doctor's money could buy. The staff wanted to kick them out. The patrons were staring, but they didn't know that the trembling waitress approaching their table wasn't there to take an order. She was the only person in the world who could save the billionaire's baby, and she was about to risk everything to do it. The clinking of silverware against fine bone china sounded less like dining and more like a battlefield to Sarah during the Friday night rush. The Obsidian Room wasn't just a restaurant. It was a theater of wealth, a place where a single appetizer cost more than Sarah's entire weekly grocery budget. The air smelled of truffle oil, aged cognac, and the distinct cold scent of old money. Sarah adjusted her apron, wincing as the stiff fabric rubbed against the bruise on her hip, a souvenir from bumping into the industrial freezer earlier that morning. She was 26, but her eyes held the exhaustion of someone twice her age. Her blonde hair was pulled back into a severe bun, mandated by the employee handbook, and her hands, though steady, were rough from years of harsh detergents and scrubbing. Table 4 needs water. Now, Sarah, not tomorrow. Now. The voice snapped at her ear like a whip. It was Marcus, the floor manager. Marcus was a man who wore suits that were too tight and a cologne that was too strong, trying desperately to mask his insecurities with cruelty. He hated Sarah. He hated that she was quiet. He hated that she didn't flirt back. And most of all, he hated that she was a single woman, struggling to survive, which he viewed as a personal failing on her part. "I'm going, Marcus," Sarah whispered, grabbing the crystal pitcher. "And smile," he hissed, grabbing her arm just tight enough to be painful, but loose enough to deny it later. "The owner, Mr. Sterling, is reviewing the cameras tonight. If I see that sour expression again, you'll be back to washing dishes at the diner on 4th Street. Sarah nodded, pulling her arm away. She couldn't lose this job. The tips at the Obsidian Room were the only thing keeping the lights on in her tiny studio apartment in Queens. She had debts, medical debts, left over from her mother's hospice care 2 years ago, that felt like an anchor dragging her into the deep ocean. As she poured sparkling water for a couple who didn't even acknowledge her existence, the heavy oak doors at the front of the restaurant swung open. The room, usually buzzing with the low hum of gossip and business deals, fell momentarily silent. A man walked in. He was tall, wearing a charcoal suit that was clearly bespoke but rumpled as if he had slept in it. His dark hair was messy and heavy, bags hung under his eyes. But it wasn't his appearance that stopped conversation. It was what he was pushing. A stroller. A Silver Cross Balmoral pram, the kind used by royalty, looking jarringly out of place amidst the mahogany and velvet of the dining room. "It's Lucas Vance," a woman at table 2 whispered loudly. "The CEO of Vance Dynamics. I heard his wife died in childbirth 6 months ago. Tragic." "He looks deranged," her husband muttered, cutting into his steak. "Who brings a baby to a Michelin star establishment at 8:00 p.m.? Marcus intercepted Lucas before he could take 3 steps. His smile was oily and practiced. "Mr. Vance, an unexpected honor. However, we do have a strict policy regarding children under 12 after 6:00 p.m. Perhaps I could arrange a private room, or perhaps takeout." "Lucas." Vance looked at the manager with eyes that were red-rimmed and hollow. He didn't look like a billionaire titan of industry. He looked like a ghost. "I don't want takeout," Lucas said, his voice rasping. "And I don't care about your policy. I was told Chef Pierre makes a specific organic squash puree that is the best in the city. My son. He hasn't eaten a full meal in 3 days. He rejects everything. The doctors said try anything, so I am trying anything." He pulled a thick clip of cash from his pocket, thousands of dollars, and shoved it into Marcus's breast pocket. "Get me a table, somewhere quiet. Bring the puree. If he eats it, I'll buy this damn building." Marcus's greed instantly overrode his snobbery. He patted the pocket, his eyes gleaming. "Right away, Mr. Vance. Right this way." "Sarah." Sarah jumped as her name was barked across the room. "Set up the corner booth. VIP service. Immediate priority." Sarah rushed over, clearing the reserved sign from the secluded booth in the back. As Lucas maneuvered the pram to the table, a high-pitched, weak wail erupted from inside the stroller. It wasn't the healthy cry of a hungry baby. It was a jagged, pained sound, like a kitten trapped in rain. Lucas flinched as if he'd been struck. He reached into the pram and lifted the baby out. Sarah paused, her heart skipping a beat. The baby, a boy, was tiny. Too tiny for 6 months. His skin was pale, almost translucent, and his fists were clenched tight. He was arching his back, screaming with a desperate intensity that made the hair on Sarah's arms stand up. "Shh, Leo, please," Lucas begged, rocking the child. The billionaire sounded on the verge of tears himself. "Please, buddy. Just calm down. Food is coming." The baby didn't stop. The crying escalated, piercing through the ambient jazz music. Heads turned. Annoyed glances were exchanged. "This is ridiculous," the woman at table 2 said, louder this time. "I can't hear myself think." Sarah approached the table with a glass of water for Lucas. "Sir, your water." Lucas didn't look up. He was bouncing, Leo panic rising in his movements. Just tell them to hurry with the food. Please." Sarah looked at the baby. Her eyes narrowed slightly. She had seen that specific arch of the back before. She had heard that specific pitch of screaming. In a life she had tried to forget a life before the debts and the waitressing, she had known exactly what that meant. "Sir," Sarah said softly, breaking protocol. Has he been checked for—" "Sarah." Marcus appeared behind her, grabbing her shoulder. "The kitchen. Now. Chef Pierre needs the puree run out the second it's plated. Stop bothering the guest." Sarah cast one last look at the screaming infant and the desperate father before being shoved toward the kitchen doors. She had a sinking feeling in her gut. The puree wasn't going to work. And if someone didn't intervene soon, that baby wasn't just going to be hungry. He was going to be in serious danger. The kitchen was a chaotic symphony of shouting chefs, clanging pans, and the hiss of steam. Chef Pierre, a man whose temper was as legendary as his sauces, was meticulously plating a small bowl of orange puree. "Simple," Pierre muttered, wiping the rim of the bowl with a cloth. "But perfection. If the brat doesn't eat this, he has no taste." He shoved the plate into Sarah's hands. "Go. Don't spill a drop. That bowl costs $40. Sarah hurried back out onto the floor. The atmosphere in the dining room had shifted from annoyance to open hostility. Leo was still screaming, his face turning a blotchy red. Lucas looked like he was drowning. He was holding the baby against his shoulder, pacing back and forth in the small space beside his table. "Mr. Vance," Sarah said, placing the bowl on the table. "The puree." Lucas practically threw himself into the seat. He sat Leo on his lap, trying to maneuver a small silver spoon toward the crying baby's mouth. "Look, Leo. Look at this." Lucas pleaded, his voice cracking. "It smells good. Just try it. Please, for Daddy. Just one bite." He pushed the spoon against Leo's lips. The baby clamped his mouth shut, thrashing his head from side to side. The puree smeared across his cheek. Lucas tried again, desperation making his movements clumsy. This time Leo swung a tiny fist, knocking the spoon out of Lucas's hand. It clattered onto the floor, splattering orange puree onto Lucas's expensive suit and the pristine white tablecloth. "Damn it!" Lucas yelled, slamming his hand on the table. The restaurant went dead silent. Leo, startled by the noise, screamed even harder, practically gasping for air between sobs. Marcus stormed over his face, purple with rage. He signaled to the security guard standing by the entrance. "Mr. Vance," Marcus said, his voice losing all its oily charm. "This is unacceptable. We have accommodated you, but you are disturbing the other guests. Look at the mess. I'm afraid I have to ask you to leave." "I'm not leaving until he eats," Lucas roared, standing up, holding the sobbing baby against his chest. "I have money. I'll buy the restaurant. Just help me get him to eat." "Money cannot buy manners, nor can it silence a brat," Marcus sneered. "Security, please escort Mr. Vance out." Sarah watched from the service station. Her heart was hammering against her ribs. She knew she should stay quiet. She knew she needed this job. But looking at Leo, she saw something no one else was seeing. The baby wasn't just being fussy. He wasn't just a brat. He was in pain. As the security guard, a burly man named Tiny, reached for Lucas's arm, Sarah moved. She didn't think. She just moved. She crossed the dining room floor in 3 long strides, stepping between the security guard and the billionaire. "Stop," Sarah said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was firm. Marcus stared at her, his jaw dropping. "Sarah, what do you think you're doing? Get back to your station." "He's not being difficult," Sarah said, turning to look Lucas in the eye. "He's in pain. The way he's arching his back, the way he turns away from the spoon. It's not that he doesn't want to eat. It's that eating hurts him." Lucas looked at her. Really looked at her for the first time. He saw the blue eyes filled with empathy, the intelligence behind the tired expression. "What?" "Sarah, you are fired," Marcus shrieked. "Get out. Take your apron off and get out." "No," Sarah said, surprised by her own boldness. She looked at Lucas. "May I, please? I know what's wrong." Lucas hesitated. He was a man who trusted data experts and top-tier professionals. Sarah was a waitress in a stained apron who was currently being fired. But the experts had failed him. The doctors had failed him. And right now, holding his starving son, Lucas saw the one thing in Sarah's eyes he hadn't seen in anyone else's confidence. "Marcus, back off," Lucas growled at the manager. He turned to Sarah and held out the crying bundle. "If you hurt him." "I won't," Sarah whispered. She took the baby. He was light, terrifyingly light. As soon as he was in her arms, she didn't try to feed him. She didn't bounce him. She changed his position completely. Instead of cradling him on his back or sitting him up, she laid him stomach down across her forearm, holding his chin gently to keep his airway open. The colic hold, but modified. "You're holding him like a football," the woman at table 2 scoffed. "Silence!" Lucas snapped at the woman, his eyes glued to Sarah. Sarah began to sway. Not a rhythmic bounce, but a specific swaying motion that mimicked the feeling of being in the womb. And then she did something that made the entire restaurant freeze. She began to hum. It wasn't a nursery rhyme. It was a low, resonant vibration deep in her throat. She placed her free hand on the baby's lower back and applied a very specific circular pressure with her thumb. "It's his vagus nerve," Sarah murmured, mostly to herself. "He's overstimulated, and his swallowing reflex is locked because of acid reflux. You have to reset the system." For 10 seconds, Leo continued to cry. Marcus was already pulling out his phone to call the police. Lucas held his breath, his hands shaking. Then at the 15-second mark, a miracle happened. Leo let out a long, shuddering breath. His tiny fists, which had been clenched white for an hour, slowly uncurled. His back relaxed. The screaming stopped, replaced by a soft, whimpering hiccup. The silence that filled the obsidian room was heavier than the noise had been. "He stopped," Lucas whispered, sounding as if he'd witnessed water turning into wine. "He stopped crying." Sarah didn't celebrate. She kept swaying, kept rubbing that specific spot on his back. "He's not ready to eat yet," she said softly. "Give me the water, not the puree. The puree is too acidic. Just warm water." Lucas grabbed the glass Sarah had brought earlier. "It's room temperature." "That works?" Sarah sat down in the booth, something strictly forbidden for staff. She shifted Leo so he was semi-upright, but still supported by her arm, ensuring no pressure was on his stomach. She dipped her pinky finger into the water and let a drop fall onto his lips. Leo licked his lips. He didn't turn away. "Now," Sarah said, looking at Lucas. "Do you have any formula, not the thick stuff? Hypoallergenic. I have a bottle in the bag." But he throws it up. "Hand it to me." Lucas scrambled to grab the bottle from the diaper bag. Sarah took it, checked the temperature on her wrist, and then, instead of shoving it in his mouth, she just brushed the nipple against his cheek. Leo turned his head toward it. Rooting. Instinct taking over pain. She let him latch. The sound of the baby drinking glug, glug, glug was the loudest sound in the room. Lucas Vance, the man who could buy countries, dropped to his knees right there on the dirty restaurant floor. He watched his son eat for the first time in days, tears streaming down his face. "He's eating," Lucas choked out. "Oh God, he's eating." Sarah smiled, a genuine warm smile that transformed her face. "He was just scared, sir. It hurt to eat, so he stopped trying. We just had to show him it wouldn't hurt this time." At that moment, Marcus stepped forward, his face a mask of cold fury. He didn't care about the baby. He cared that his authority had been challenged in front of the wealthy elite. "That was a touching performance," Marcus spat. "But you are still fired, Sarah. You violated health codes by handling a guest's child. You sat at a customer's table and you disobeyed a direct order. Get your things. Now." Sarah's smile faded. She looked down at the baby, who was now drinking contentedly, his eyes half closed. She knew Marcus was right by the book. She had broken every rule. She looked up at Lucas, expecting him to defend her. But Lucas was mesmerized by his son, completely lost in the moment of relief not hearing the manager's words. "I'll put him back in the stroller," Sarah said quietly. She gently transferred the feeding baby back to the pram, propping the bottle carefully. "Get out," Marcus hissed, pointing to the back door. Sarah untied her apron. She placed it on the table next to the half-eaten puree. She didn't say a word. She just walked away out the back door, into the cold, rainy alleyway, leaving behind the warmth, the money, and the only person who had looked at her with gratitude in years. She had saved the baby, but she had lost her livelihood, and she had no idea that this was only the beginning. The heavy metal door of the obsidian room clicked shut behind Sarah, severing the connection between two worlds. Inside there was warmth, the smell of roasted duck, and a baby who had finally found peace. Outside in the alleyway off 53rd Street, the rain was coming down in sheets, mixing with the grime of the city to create a slick, oily film on the pavement. Sarah leaned against the brick wall, the cold water soaking through her thin, white uniform shirt instantly. She shivered, but not just from the cold. The adrenaline that had propelled her to intervene was crashing, leaving her with the hollow, sick feeling of disaster. "Stupid," she whispered to the darkness. "So stupid, Sarah." She checked her pockets. She had her phone screen cracked her keys and exactly $12 in cash from the early shift tips. Her coat was still inside the staff locker room. To get it, she would have to walk back past Marcus. She couldn't do it. She couldn't face the smirk she knew would be plastered on his face. She began to walk. It was a 40-minute subway ride and a 10-minute walk to her basement apartment in Queens. Without her coat, the wind cut through her like a knife. As she trudged toward the subway station, her mind drifted back to the why. Why did she know how to hold the baby? Why did she know about the vagus nerve? It wasn't magic. It was the ghost of the life she had lost. 3 years ago, Sarah Miller hadn't been a waitress. She had been the youngest head nurse in the neonatal intensive care unit, NICU, at St. Jude's Research Hospital in Boston. She was brilliant, dedicated, and on track to become a nurse practitioner. She remembered the name that ruined her, Dr. Aris Thorne. Dr. Thorne was a celebrity surgeon, the kind who brought in millions in donations and had a wing of the hospital named after his family. He was also an alcoholic. Sarah had caught him. She had caught him trying to insert a central line into a premature infant while his hands were shaking from withdrawal. She had stopped him. She had reported him. She thought the system would protect her. She was wrong. Thorne had connections. The hospital board buried the report. 2 weeks later, narcotics went missing from the supply closet. They were found in Sarah's locker, planted obviously. But who would the police believe, the legendary Dr. Thorne or the 23-year-old nurse from a poor family? She was fired. Her license was suspended, pending an investigation that dragged on for years. She was blacklisted. If she tried to get a job at a clinic, a school, even a pharmacy, the background check flagged her as a thief. So she ran to New York. She disappeared into the service industry, hiding her brilliance under a stained apron, punishing herself for trying to be a hero. And tonight, she had tried to be a hero again. And just like last time, it had cost her everything. By the time she reached her apartment building, a crumbling brick structure where the heater rattled and the hallways smelled of boiled cabbage, she was soaked to the bone. She unlocked her door, stepping into the small, damp room. She froze. A piece of paper was taped to the inside of her door. It was bright red. Final notice of eviction. She stared at it, her hands numb. She was 2 months behind. Marcus had promised her a double shift next week, enough to pay off the landlord, Mr. Henderson. But Marcus had just fired her. Sarah sank onto the floor, her wet back sliding down the door. She pulled her knees to her chest. There were no tears left, just a terrifying, silent void. She had $12. She had no job. She had nowhere to go. And the worst part, she couldn't stop thinking about the baby Leo. She hoped Lucas Vance knew how to burp him properly. If he didn't, the screaming would start again in an hour. Back at the Obsidian Room, the atmosphere was fragile. Lucas Vance sat frozen in the booth for 5 minutes watching Leo sleep. The bottle was empty. The baby's breathing was deep and rhythmic, a sound Lucas hadn't heard in months. It was the most beautiful music he had ever heard. "Mr. Vance!" Lucas snapped his head up. Marcus was standing there holding a complimentary bottle of vintage Dom Perignon. "A small token of apology for the disturbance," Marcus said, his voice dripping with faux sincerity. "I'm terribly sorry you had to deal with that hysterical waitress. It's so hard to find good help these days. She was clearly on something. I've handled the situation. She's gone." Lucas stared at the champagne, then at Marcus. The fog of exhaustion was lifting, replaced by the sharp, calculating intellect that had built Vance Dynamics. "Gone?" Lucas asked, his voice low. "Terminated. Immediately. We don't tolerate staff who manhandle the guests' children. I assumed you would press charges, but I thought simply removing her was the most efficient solution for tonight." Lucas slowly stood up. He was 6'2", and when he wasn't hunching over a sick child, he was intimidating. He stepped close to Marcus. "You fired her." "Of course, sir. For you." "She saved my son," Lucas said. The sentence hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Marcus blinked, his smile faltering. "Sir, she violated protocol." "My son was starving," Lucas said, his voice rising, drawing the attention of the entire room again. "I have been to 6 specialists in 3 countries. None of them could get him to eat. That woman walked over here, diagnosed him in 10 seconds and fixed it. And you fired her." I didn't know," Marcus stammered, backing away. "Where is she?" Lucas demanded. "She left. Out the back." Lucas grabbed his phone. He dialed his personal head of security, a man named Victor Draven. "Victor, I need you at the Obsidian Room on 53rd. Now. Bring the SUV and bring the legal team." "Sir." Victor's voice crackled in his ear. "I want the employment records of a waitress here, first name Sarah. I want her full name, her address, and her history. And Victor, if the manager gives you any trouble, buy the building." Lucas hung up. He looked at Marcus, who was now pale and sweating. "You have 5 minutes to get me her file," Lucas said coldly, "or I will destroy this establishment brick by brick." It took Victor 20 minutes to arrive, and another 10 to intimidate Marcus into handing over the personnel files. Lucas sat in the back of his armored SUV, Leo strapped safely into the car seat next to him. Victor handed Lucas a tablet. "Here it is, boss. Sarah Miller. Address in Queens. It's not a good neighborhood." Lucas swiped through the file. It was thin. Minimum wage, no emergency contact, listed. But then Victor swiped to the next page. "I ran a deeper background check, boss. You need to see this." Lucas looked at the screen. A news article from the Boston Globe dated 3 years ago. "Rising star nurse disgraced in drug scandal at St. Jude's." Lucas scanned the article. "Accused of stealing narcotics. License revoked. Claimed she was whistleblowing on Dr. Aris Thorne." Lucas stopped. He knew Aris Thorne. Thorne had sat on the board of a biotech charity Lucas donated to. Thorne was a pompous, arrogant man who always had a tremor in his hands. Lucas looked at the photo of Sarah in the article. She looked younger, happier, wearing blue scrubs and holding a Nurse of the Year plaque. The contrast with the tired, bruised woman who had served him water was heartbreaking. She was a NICU nurse, Lucas realized. That's why she knew. He looked at Leo sleeping peacefully. Sarah hadn't just been a waitress stepping in. She had been a medical professional who risked her anonymity, risked being recognized and humiliated just to help a stranger's baby. "She saved him," Lucas said, a lump forming in his throat. Victor looked at the timestamp on her clock out. "She clocked out well. She was terminated 45 minutes ago." "It's pouring rain," Lucas said, looking out the window. "She didn't have a coat. I saw her apron on the table. She left her coat, likely locked in the staff room, and she wasn't allowed back in," Victor surmised. "Drive," Lucas commanded. "Get us to Queens, now." "Don't." The black SUV tore through the city, ignoring speed limits. Lucas felt a sense of urgency he couldn't explain. It wasn't just gratitude. It was guilt. He had let her walk away. He had been so self-absorbed in his relief that he hadn't protected the person who caused it. They pulled up to the curb of a dilapidated building in Queens. The streetlights were broken. Trash cans were overturned. It was a stark contrast to the penthouse Lucas called home. "Stay with Leo," Lucas told Victor. "Boss, I should go with you. This isn't a safe area." "I'll be fine." Lucas stepped out into the rain. He found the buzzer for Miller Apt 1B. He pressed it. No answer. He pressed it again. Still nothing. He tried the front door. The lock was broken. It pushed open with a groan. He walked into the hallway. It smelled of mildew. He went down the stairs to the basement level. He found apartment 1B. The door was thin wood, the paint peeling. But what stopped Lucas was the sound coming from inside. It wasn't crying. It was the sound of heavy furniture being dragged. Lucas knocked. Sarah, Miller." The noise stopped. Silence. "Sarah, it's Lucas Vance, the man from the restaurant." A moment later, the door cracked open, a grand total of 2 inches held by a chain. One blue eye peered out. It was red and swollen. "Mr. Vance?" Her voice was shaking. Is Leo okay? Did he get sick again?" Lucas felt his heart break. She was standing in a dark apartment, clearly in distress, and her first question was about his son. "Leo is perfect," Lucas said softly. "He's sleeping. But I came to bring you this." He held up her coat. He had made Victor go back into the restaurant and demand it from the locker room before they left. Sarah stared at the coat through the crack. "You came all the way to Queens to return a coat. And to talk. Please, Sarah, can I come in?" I can't," she stammered. "It's a mess. I'm packing." Lucas frowned. "Packing at midnight." He pushed gently on the door. "Sarah, what's going on?" She didn't answer, but her resistance on the door faded. Lucas saw the red paper taped to the wood. Eviction. "Open the door, Sarah," Lucas said, his voice firm but kind. She undid the chain. The apartment was barely a room. A mattress on the floor, a single hot plate and boxes. Lots of boxes. She had been packing her meager life into cardboard. Sarah stood there, shivering in a damp, oversized t-shirt. "I don't have anywhere to sit," she said, looking down at her bare feet. "The landlord is coming at 6:20 a.m. to change the locks. I have to be gone." "Over my dead body," Lucas muttered. "Excuse me." Lucas took a step inside. "You aren't going anywhere, Sarah." "Well, actually, you are. You're coming with me." Sarah laughed, a dry, brittle sound. "With you, Mr. Vance, I appreciate you bringing the coat, but I'm a nobody. I'm a fired waitress with a criminal record. Yes, I know you probably looked me up and $12 to my name. You don't want to be involved with this." "I don't care about the record," Lucas said. "I know who Aris Thorne is. I know he's a liar." Sarah's head snapped up. You believe me? I saw how you handled my son. A drug addict doesn't have hands that steady. A thief doesn't have that kind of patience. Lucas took a deep breath. Sarah, my son needs a nurse, a full-time live-in specialist. I have been paying agencies $10,000 a month to send me experts who don't know half of what you know. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a checkbook. I'm offering you a job, private nurse for Leo Vance. Room and board included at my penthouse. Salary is, let's say, triple whatever you were making at the restaurant. Sarah stared at him. The room seemed to spin. You barely know me. I know you saved his life when no one else could, Lucas said, intensity burning in his eyes. And I pay my debts. Pack your things, Sarah. Not for the street, for the penthouse. Sarah looked at the eviction notice, then at the man offering her a lifeline. It felt like a trap. It felt too good to be true. But then she thought of Leo's tiny face and the way he had looked at her when the pain finally stopped. I need 5 minutes, she whispered. Lucas smiled. Take your time. I'll carry the boxes. The elevator to the penthouse of the Vance Millennium Tower didn't just move. It ascended with a hushed pneumatic sigh that felt like leaving the earth behind. When the doors slid open, Sarah Miller stepped out of her old life and into a world made of glass, steel, and silence. Lucas Vance walked in ahead of her, carrying Leo, while Victor followed with Sarah's 4 meager cardboard boxes. The contrast was almost offensive. The foyer alone was larger than the entire apartment Sarah had just been evicted from. A floating staircase dominated the center of the room, and floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of a rain-swept Manhattan that looked like a tray of jewels spilled on black velvet. Welcome home, Lucas said, turning to her. Or, well, welcome to work. But I hope it feels like home. It's very big, Sarah managed to say, clutching her purse. She felt small, dirty, and out of place in her worn sneakers against the Italian marble floors. Your wing is to the east, Lucas gestured. You have a suite connected to Leo's nursery. You'll have total autonomy over his schedule, his diet, and his care. If you need anything, medical equipment, organic, produce specific linens, you tell the house manager, Mrs. Higgins. She has been instructed that your word is law regarding my son. As if summoned, Mrs. Higgins appeared. She was a stern woman in her 60s, with hair like steel wool and eyes that scanned Sarah like a barcode reader. She looked at Sarah's frayed jeans and the wet hair plastering her skull. This is the new nurse, Mrs. Higgins asked, her tone neutral but chilly. This is Sarah, Lucas corrected firmly. She saved Leo's life tonight. Treat her with the same respect you would treat me. Of course, sir, Mrs. Higgins said, though her eyes remained skeptical. I will show her to her quarters. The next 2 weeks were a blur of adjustment. Sarah expected the luxury to be the hardest part, to get used to the 1,000 thread-count sheets, the private chef, the silence. But the hardest part was the waiting for the other shoe to drop. She kept expecting Lucas to realize he had made a mistake, or for the police to show up at the door. But they didn't. Instead, a routine emerged. Sarah took full control of Leo's environment. She implemented a strict, low-stimulation protocol. She threw out the flashing electronic toys and replaced them with soft wooden blocks. She banned the harsh cleaning chemicals the maids used in the nursery and insisted on vinegar and water. She prepared all of Leo's meals herself, steaming organic pears and sweet potatoes, massaging his gut afterward to aid digestion. The change in Leo was nothing short of miraculous. The pale, screaming ghost of a baby began to fill out. His cheeks grew round and rosy. The dark circles under his eyes vanished. And for the first time in his short life, he smiled. It happened on a Tuesday morning. Lucas was rushing to a board meeting, adjusting his tie in the nursery doorway. "I'll be back by 6, Lucas said, checking his watch. "How did he sleep?" 6 hours straight, Sarah said, beaming as she changed Leo on the table. "Look at him, Lucas. Look who's awake." Lucas walked over. Leo looked up, locked eyes with his father, and broke into a gummy, drooling grin, kicking his legs in delight. Lucas froze. He reached out a trembling finger, and Leo grabbed it, squeezing tight. He knows me," Lucas whispered. "He's actually happy." Lucas looked at Sarah. The morning sun was catching the stray hairs escaping her bun. She was wearing simple navy scrubs she had ordered, but to Lucas, she looked like an angel. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't know how I can ever repay you." "Just keep him safe," Sarah smiled. The moment was intimate, charged with a shared relief that felt dangerously close to something else. "Lucas!" A sharp, feminine voice shattered the mood. Standing in the doorway was Elena Sinclair. Elena was the daughter of a real estate tycoon, a woman who had been circling Lucas Vance like a shark ever since his wife passed. She was stunning, wearing a red Valentino dress that cost more than a car, her dark hair cascading in perfect waves. "Elena," Lucas said, pulling his hand away from Leo. "I didn't know you were coming by. I have a key, darling. Remember." Elena walked in her heels, clicking aggressively on the floor. She looked at Leo with feigned interest, then turned her gaze to Sarah. Her eyes narrowed instantly. She saw the beauty beneath the scrubs, and more importantly, she saw the way Lucas was looking at her. "And who is this?" Elena asked, wrinkling her nose slightly. "The new help. This is Sarah, Leo's nurse," Lucas said, his tone cooling. "Sarah," Eleanor repeated, testing the name like it was a bad taste. "She looks young. Does she have references? You know how careful one must be, Lucas. There are so many opportunists in this city." "She's fully vetted," Lucas lied smoothly. "Sarah, this is Eleanor Sinclair, an old family friend." "A pleasure," Sarah said, keeping her head down. She recognized the type. Elena was a predator in silk. Elena walked over to the changing table. "Well, make sure you wash your hands thoroughly, dear. We wouldn't want to spread germs to the poor thing." She turned to Lucas, looping her arm through his. "Lunch at the Mark. You promised me we'd discuss the gala details." Lucas looked at Sarah, a silent apology in his eyes, before letting Eleanor lead him away. As they left, Sarah heard Elena's voice drift back down the hallway. "She seems a bit rough around the edges, darling. Are you sure she's qualified? I could have Dr. Thorne recommend someone from his private registry." Sarah's blood ran cold. Dr. Thorne. Eleanor Sinclair knew Aris Thorne. The glass castle suddenly felt very fragile. A month passed. The leaves in Central Park turned to gold, and Leo continued to thrive. But Sarah lived in a state of constant low-level anxiety. Every time the elevator dinged, she expected to see Dr. Thorne. Her fears were realized, though not in the way she expected. It was the night of the Vance Foundation Gala, the biggest social event of the season. It was a black tie affair, held in the ballroom of the Pierre Hotel, raising money for pediatric research. Lucas had insisted Sarah attend. "I need Leo there for the photo op. It sounds cold, I know, but donors need to see the miracle baby to open their checkbooks. I won't trust anyone else to hold him. Please, Sarah, I'll buy you a dress." Sarah had tried to refuse, but Lucas was relentless. Now she stood in the corner of the glittering ballroom, wearing a midnight blue gown that was modest but fit her like a second skin. She held Leo, who was dressed in a tiny tuxedo, sleeping soundly against her chest. She felt exposed. Cameras were flashing everywhere. "You look breathtaking." Sarah jumped. Lucas was standing beside her, holding 2 flutes of champagne. He looked devastatingly handsome in his tuxedo. "I feel like an imposter," Sarah whispered. "You're the most real person in this room," Lucas said, his eyes scanning her face. "Sarah, I've been meaning to talk to you about us, about how well Leo is doing and how much I've come to rely on you." Sarah's heart hammered. "Lucas, I work for you." "I know." He stepped closer. "But lines blur when I look at you." "Lucas." Elena Sinclair materialized out of the crowd, her smile tight and predatory. But she wasn't alone. Walking beside her, holding a glass of scotch with a hand that had a slight noticeable tremor, was a man Sarah had hoped never to see again. Dr. Aris Thorne. Sarah instinctively turned her body to shield Leo, her face draining of color. "Lucas," Eleanor purred, "I wanted to introduce you to the newest board member of your foundation. You know the legendary Dr. Thorne, of course." "We've met," Lucas said, shaking Thorne's hand. "Good to see you, Aris." "The pleasure is mine," Thorne said. His voice was smooth, cultured, and terrifying. "Elena tells me you've had a miracle with your son. I was intrigued. I'd love to meet the little fighter." Thorne turned his gaze to Sarah. Time seemed to stop. Thorne's eyes, milky with age and dissipation, squinted at her. He looked at her blonde hair, her blue eyes, the way she held the baby. Recognition dawned slowly then, all at once. His smile didn't waver, but his eyes turned into chips of ice. "Well, well," Thorne said softly. "I didn't know you hired." Familiar faces. "You know Sarah?" Lucas asked, confused. "Sarah." Thorne chuckled darkly. "Is that what she's going by?" "I know Nurse Miller. Former Nurse Miller, I should say." Eleanor feigned shock. "Former? Whatever do you mean, Aris?" "She was a nurse at St. Jude's," Thorne announced, his voice raising just enough to attract the attention of the nearby circle of donors, "until she was fired for stealing fentanyl from the neonatal unit, and if I recall attempting to falsify records to blame a senior surgeon for her addiction." The circle of people around them went silent. The music seemed to fade. Lucas stiffened. "Watch your words, Aris." "I'm just stating public record, Lucas," Thorne said, shrugging. "I'm surprised your background check didn't catch it. This woman is a liability. She's a drug addict who hides behind a nurse's uniform. And you have her holding your heir." Sarah felt the room spinning. She couldn't breathe. "That's a lie," she whispered, but her voice was too small against the weight of his authority. "You know it's a lie. You were the one. I was the one who caught you." Thorne interrupted smoothly, stepping closer, smelling of expensive scotch and rot. "And I see you've weaseled your way into another high-profile family. Tell me, Lucas, has any of your silver gone missing yet? Has the baby been sleeping too well? Perhaps a little sedative in his bottle to keep him quiet?" That accusation was the spark. Lucas stepped in front of Sarah, shielding her from Thorne. "That is enough." "Is it?" Elena interjected, her voice laced with poison. "Lucas, look at her. She's shaking. If Aris is right—" "Oh my God, Lucas, She has access to Leo's medication. We have to call the police." "I said enough," Lucas roared, causing the entire ballroom to freeze. But the seed of doubt had been planted. The whispers started instantly. Drug addict, thief, endangered the baby. Sarah looked at Lucas's back. She saw the tension in his shoulders. She knew that even if he defended her now, the media storm that would follow would destroy Vance Dynamics. Billionaire hires junkie nurse. It would ruin him, and Thorne would win. Again. Sarah made a choice. "Here," she said, her voice trembling but clear. She passed the sleeping Leo to Lucas. "Sarah." Lucas turned to her, his eyes pleading with her not to run. "I can't be here," she said, tears finally spilling over. "I won't let them do this to you. I won't let him use me to hurt Leo." "Sarah, wait." But she was already moving, picking up her skirts and running through the crowd. She ran past the gawking socialites, past the flashing cameras, and out the grand doors of the Pierre Hotel. She didn't go back to the penthouse. She knew Thorne would have the police waiting there within the hour. She had to disappear. Inside the ballroom, Lucas Vance stared at the doors she had fled through. He looked down at his son, then up at Dr. Thorne, who was looking smugly at Elena. "You better hope you're right, Aris." Lucas said, his voice a low, dangerous growl that terrified everyone within earshot. "Because if I find out you lied to me, I will spend every dollar of my $3 billion destroying you." But Sarah was gone, and this time she wasn't just in an alleyway. She was a fugitive in the public eye, hunted by the media with no resources and no allies. Or so she thought, because as she ran down Fifth Avenue, a black town car pulled up beside her. The back window rolled down. It wasn't the police. It was Chef Pierre from the Obsidian Room. "Get in," the grumpy French chef said. "I heard what happened on the radio. I never liked that manager Marcus, and I certainly don't like men who make babies cry. Get in." The kitchen of the Obsidian Room was silent save for the hum of the refrigerators. It was 3:30 a.m. Sarah sat on a crate wrapped in an oversized chef's coat, shaking from the cold and the fear. "Drink," Chef Pierre commanded, sliding a mug of hot chocolate across the steel table. "It will not fix your life, but it will warm your hands." "Thorne will find me," Sarah whispered, staring into the dark liquid. "He has money power. I'm just a fugitive nurse." "He has money," Pierre said, sharpening a large knife with a rhythmic shh. "But you have the father, and that man looked ready to burn the city down when you ran." Before Sarah could answer, the back door swung open. Rain swirled in, followed by a dark figure. It was Lucas Vance. He was soaked, his tuxedo ruined his eyes wild with desperation. When he saw Sarah, the tension left his body in a rush. He crossed the kitchen in 2 long strides and pulled her into a crushing embrace. "I thought I lost you." He breathed into her hair. "I didn't steal those drugs, Lucas," she sobbed against his chest. "I swear." "I know." Lucas pulled back, framing her face in his hands. "I never believed him. But now we have to prove it. We have to catch him." "How?" Sarah asked. "He's too careful." Lucas's eyes hardened. "He's an addict, Sarah. And addicts make mistakes when they get confident. Tomorrow he's coming to the penthouse to medicate Leo. He wants to sedate him to prove I can't handle a crying baby. That's when we catch him." "He won't do it if I'm there," Sarah said. "He won't see Sarah the waitress," Lucas said, a dangerous smile forming. "He's going to meet someone else entirely." The next morning, the sun streamed into the Vance penthouse, illuminating a tense scene. Eleanor Sinclair sat on the sofa looking victorious, while Dr. Thorne paced nervously, his hands twitching in his pockets. "This is a standard wellness check, Lucas," Thorne said, his voice tight. "The board is concerned. A mild sedative for the boy will prove you are prioritizing his health." "Fine," Lucas said, standing by the nursery door. "But since my competency is in question, I've hired an independent medical auditor to witness the procedure. Standard legal protection." Thorne scoffed. "I don't need an auditor. I am Aris Thorne." "Then you have nothing to hide," a cold voice said. A woman stepped out of the hallway. She wore a severe black suit, dark glasses, and a sharp black bob wig. She held a clipboard and radiated authority. Thorne glared at her, but opened his medical bag. He pulled out a vial of diazepam and a syringe. With his back turned to Lucas, he quickly drew the liquid, but his hand slipped into his pocket for a split second, a practiced move to divert half the dose for himself. "Done," Thorne said, turning back with the syringe. He approached the crib where Leo was cooing. "This will help him sleep." "Stop," the auditor commanded. Thorne froze. "Excuse me. I need to verify the dosage volume before administration," the woman said, stepping forward. "Hand me the syringe." "This is an insult," Thorne yelled, panic flaring in his eyes. He tried to push past her to the medical waste bin. "I won't be treated like a criminal." "Victor!" Lucas shouted. Victor, the head of security, lunged from the shadows, grabbing Thorne's wrist. The doctor thrashed, desperate to destroy the evidence, screaming for Elena to call the police. "Let go of me! That woman is a nobody," Thorne shrieked. "Actually," the woman said. She reached up and pulled off the black wig, shaking her long blonde hair free. She removed the dark glasses, revealing Sarah's piercing blue eyes. "I'm the witness," Sarah said. Thorne's face went deadly pale. "You?" "Me," Sarah said, grabbing the syringe from his hand. She held it up to the light. "Half empty. Just like at St. Jude's, you're stealing from a baby heiress." The elevator doors pinged open. Police officers swarmed into the room, followed by the hospital administrator. "Dr. Thorne," the lead officer announced, "we have a warrant for your arrest, and we have the live stream from the nursery camera recorded." Thorne slumped defeated. As they handcuffed him, he turned a venomous look on Eleanor. "She knew. She told me to do it. She wanted the baby sedated so she could control the estate." "Liar!" Elena screamed as an officer grabbed her arm. "Lucas, he's lying. Get them out," Lucas said coldly. As the room cleared, leaving only the silence of the penthouse, the weight of the last few months lifted. Sarah stood there, the wig in her hand, trembling as the adrenaline crashed. "Is it over?" she whispered. Lucas walked over to her, kicking the black wig aside. He took her hands, his thumbs brushing over her knuckles. "It's over," he said softly. He looked at her not as a savior or a nurse or an employee, but as the only woman who had ever truly seen him. He leaned in, and Sarah met him. The kiss was deep, filled with relief and a promise of the future. From the crib, Leo let out a loud, happy squeal, shaking his rattle. Sarah broke the kiss, laughing through her tears. "I think the boss needs us." Lucas smiled, resting his forehead against hers. "He's got us. Both of us. If you want to stay." Sarah looked at the man, the baby, and the home that finally felt safe. "I'm not going anywhere," she said. 6 months later, the scandal was just a distant memory. Lucas Vance and Sarah Miller were married in a quiet ceremony in the park, with Chef Pierre catering and little Leo serving as the ring bearer, mostly by chewing on the pillow. Sarah had lost everything: her job, her reputation, and her hope, only to find a destiny she never could have imagined. She walked into that restaurant as a terrified waitress with nothing, and she walked out with a family. It turns out, sometimes the hardest moments in life are just setting the stage for a miracle. Did you love this story? The drama is far from over. If you enjoyed this tale of justice and romance, please hit the like button. Share this video with a friend who loves a happy ending, and subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to ring the notification bell so you never miss our next dramatic story.